Hi everyone, I'm Gena Lindsay Bourne. I'm a venture fellow here at Newchip Accelerator. For this month's March demo week, we're going to be discussing alternative funding sources with the District Director of the SBA's San Francisco office, Julie Clowes. I'm going to give her a chance to introduce herself, and I'm really looking forward to some of the insights she can share with our founder groups on how to find funding in those pre-seed and seed phases where you're getting traction, but maybe you're not ready to take on a venture round. So Julie, I'd love to give you a chance to share your background, and then we can jump right into it.
Thank you, Gena. Hello, everyone. My name is Julie, and I have been with SBA for, let's just say, over 20 years at this point, in a lot of different capacities, starting with the Detroit district office, and then in our Washington, D.C. headquarters office as an attorney, and then also back on the field side now, supporting businesses in the D.C. area, and then now out here in San Francisco. So SBA, if you are not familiar with us as an agency, we do more than PPP loans. We actually have a wide gamut of resources to provide to small businesses, everything from the different types of financial products, which I know we're going to talk more about. But we also have, a cadre of free business advisors that are available to small businesses through our Small Business Development Center, our SCORE programs, our Women Business Centers, and even Veteran Business Outreach Centers. We also provide government contracting support for small businesses as well. So, as you know, federal government is the largest purchaser of goods and services in the world, and we try to help small businesses get their fair share of that government spend. So we do provide a lot of different support. And so for people who are not familiar with SBA, our district offices are in all 50 states. We actually have 68 locations across the US and the territories. So I encourage you to learn more about us above and beyond even the financing aspect.
Thanks, Julie. And I think that's a great transition. So when we're thinking about the different products that the SBA offers, in your mind, what do you think are the best fits for entrepreneurs who are going the large growth, fast scaling route, particularly those who maybe don't have a minimum viable product yet, or have a minimum viable product, and they're maybe in their seed stage? What are your thoughts on the products that the SBA might have the best fit for those groups?
Yeah, and I think you really have to look at what that business actually needs, and maybe the timing of what they need, what they're going to use the funds for, and their ability to repay it. Like if they don't have a viable product yet, they're still maybe in the concept or feasibility testing stage, chances are they're not going to maybe have a revenue stream to be able to start repaying a traditional term loan. So really need to kind of think about all of those things for that unique business. And then look at SBA's spectrum of products and services. In the financial area, we run the gamut from microfinancing, which is the $50,000 or less, usually provided through nonprofit lenders or nonprofit organizations that we provide financial support to. Then you kind of have what we're probably most known for is our government guaranteed loan program, which is loans up to $5,000. The guarantee, I should say, is up to $5,000. This is offered through, traditional banks, but also through some nonprofit lenders, even credit unions, some CDFIs, and like MDIs, and some other organizations, financial organizations as well. And within that bucket, there's actually a lot of different products and services, and they can kind of be catered to different business needs. One of the things, and this is maybe not for someone straight out the gate, but is one of our programs is called the 504 program, which is fixed asset financing. So for businesses who maybe even in their early stages, but need to have the opportunity to purchase a facility, maybe they need a laboratory for testing, or maybe they need some other facility. This is a great tool to utilize because it enables the borrower to only have to put down 10% of the loan, and then SBA, through our certified development companies and a bank, make up the additional financing. And there's some creative uses of that program as well. And businesses can actually go beyond $5,000 or 5 million, sorry, dollars in that case, and still get an SBA guarantee on a large chunk of it.
So just to back the truck up a little bit, when you were talking about the government guarantee loans, you mentioned 5K, but I think you meant to say 5 million. Up
5
to 5
million,
million.
yes. Did I say 5 million? That's
okay.
more appealing, right? 5 million.
So just for our viewers, the government guarantee loan product has a very competitive credit rate and is up to $5 million. So you can go beyond, maybe like one marketing campaign with that.
Definitely. All right.
No, that's fine. So I want to talk a little bit about a couple of maybe case scenarios. So we have a lot of founders who are in the medical technology space, who are in the consumer packaged goods, who are doing software as a service. I'm wondering what sort of trends you're seeing with founders that are coming to the SBA. Maybe they're at the seed or Series A round, but I'm wondering what sort of trends you're seeing in the Bay Area. What kind of companies are coming to the SBA to access support?
So there's, I think the wide range. I think here, and this is a phenomena I've found since moving to the Bay Area, is that almost every business thinks that they're a candidate for venture capital.
Mm-hmm.
This could even be someone who's trying to set up a corner grocery store. So I've found that the culture here, obviously with Silicon Valley and the entrepreneurship, vibe that is just effervescent all the way through the Bay Area, everyone thinks they're a candidate for venture capital, and some are. I mean, obviously, but that's not for everybody. So it's a matter of, again, talking to them to figure out what exactly they need, where they are with their business plan or life cycle, and trying to really drill down and figure out what the best fit might be for them moving forward. Here in the Bay Area, we have a small business development center that is actually technology focused, and they define technology in the very broadest sense of that word. And that's their focus, and they really are successful in working with these businesses to get all types of financing. Again, that matching of what is best for that business with where they are at that point in time. And it's everything from, it is sometimes venture capital or angel investing, as also through other specialized, they're a financing product, but not in the traditional sense, something like our SBIR, our Small Business Innovation Research Program. So they're really great at taking the businesses that fit some of those niches and getting them into those pathways and helping them with, with its pitch decks and things that they're going to need if they're going the venture capital or maybe angel investor route, if it's packaging up proposals for an SBIR, or if it's the more traditional, the business might be a good candidate for traditional bank financing and putting those financials and other documentation together with them. So we really do see inquiries that are across the board. And I do think some lenders are comfortable with certain industries. So sometimes it's also finding that fit of what lenders might be more comfortable or have a greater degree of knowledge in certain industries, and finding that match as well.
That brings up so many great questions for me. So I have more to ask, but before I get into some of the questions, one of the things that I think is interesting is how you brought up the SBIR. And can you give maybe a high level overview of what the SBIR is, and then we can get into the nuts and bolts of what that program looks like from the lens of someone who's trying to apply for the program.
Sure. So it's our Small Business Innovation Research Program, and it's a program that's not directly funded by SBA. We're kind of more of the facilitator or the coordinator of the program across the federal government, and it is a competitive program for small businesses to kind of get a share of the research and development dollars that federal agencies have to spend. So I believe it's somewhere in the tune of every agency that has, I think, over 100 million in extramural dollars, R&D dollars to invest, is required to set aside at least 3.2% of those dollars for small businesses. And they will put out solicitations and they will say, hey, we have a need for this. And we're looking for small businesses to fund to help start creating or working on this problem or issue or idea. So it is considered America's seed fund program because it can take businesses from the phase that goes, funding is available in different phases. So phase one is the idea, the fleshing out of the idea, the feasibility, the testing of it if there needs to be testing. It's that building that concept and the feasibility and seeing if it's going to work. And the other hook with the SBIR approach is that it also has to see if there's a way to commercialize what they're doing as well. So it's satisfying a government need that the government is willing to invest R&D dollars in, and then looking to see if there's a commercialization aspect of it as well to increase the profitability for that business later on.
And I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about the phase one? So you mentioned that it's literally the idea phase. So someone who is putting together a concept, and generally it tends to be in the STEM sectors, correct?
Typically, yes, but it can run the gamut. So I always tell people, don't just qualify yourself. Take a look and see what kind of opportunities might be available right now.
And I think I remember reading that the phase one investment can go to around 150,000. Am I on the right track with that?
Yeah, I think the max is usually 250. So it can be the range, I think up to 250,000 for phase one.
And then for phase two, that's when the company has started to do some back end work. They have more of a go-to-market strategy and they're thinking about how to launch an initial product, correct?
Right. It's the continuation. They kind of maybe proven their concept. Now they're ready to take it to the next phase. And the phase two funding can support that as well. And this is also they maybe are not commercializing it yet, but there's maybe beyond the prototyping stage and into some more development.
And I'm curious, so one of the things that I found most interesting about the America Seed Fund is that there's no equity ask. Can you talk a little bit about how that decision came to be, if you're familiar with it, and what some of the benefits are of that?
Yeah, I don't really know the full history of that, but I do know it's, the intent of the program is really to help these small businesses that, as we all know, have really great ideas and are super innovative and, arguably more nimble than a lot of their larger counterparts. And it's a way to channel some of that, some of those ideas and that, that brain power to put it to work for creating products or services for the government, things that we need, that these different agencies need. But then also, like I said, give them a pathway to real profit potential by having a commercialization aspect of what they're doing. I always like to tell people, like, the one success story that probably everybody is familiar with is a company called iRobot.
Oh, yeah.
So years ago, they were a recipient of the SBIR phase 1 and 2 at least funding through the Department of Defense to create. They needed battlefield robots to go out do like mine sweeping and bomb detection and different things. And they needed something small that they could kind of lob out there onto the field and have some intelligence and do some work.
Got it.
And so we all, know that technology, the commercialization aspect, was the home robotic vacuum cleaner.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a great case study for how someone can go from idea to large commercial product and, a large company, and use all of these different financial products along the way to get them there. So I also think, I'm wondering if there's anything that's come across your through discussions over the past, year or so, if there's anybody that's any company that's applied for the phase 1 or phase 2 that really stuck out in your mind and something that you thought was interesting.
Yeah, I don't necessarily see all the applicants, but there are some businesses that I've worked with. We actually have one business here in San Jose who is part of, I've known to me because he's part of my government contracting portfolio. He's been trying to work with the government on a lot of different IT type contracts. But he also does a lot of his own R&D. And he was completely unfamiliar with the SBIR. He knew of the SBIR, but I guess he was not familiar with the fact that we can help support. And we even have a specialty SBDC here that can help support his efforts. So I was able to connect him, and he was very successful. I think he's on his second SBIR fund. So 2 separate phase 1 funding in the artificial intelligence space. So,
that's so exciting.
So he started off thinking, oh, government contracting is maybe where I'm going to find, some luck. And he's really taking off now in the SBIR space. Like I said, I know two awards at least that I know he's successfully won. I think there's a third one pending even. So
that's really exciting.
Yeah.
And I guess it starts to, bubble up thoughts for me that from what you're sharing, it sounds like the SBIR and your work with the SBA, they are different divisions, but it sounds like there's a lot of cross-pollination and a lot of cross-support. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective on that?
Sure. From a district office, part of what we do is generate the awareness of the program and how it works and how people can access it. But then there's also that support, because that very first, phase 1 proposal that a business might want to submit, chances are, it is a small business that doesn't have 40 people on its staff and has, proposal writers that can really work on this. It's probably them, and they're at their kitchen table with their laptop. So our resource partners are great avenues for them, because it's free business advising, and they can work with them once or 100 times. We are fortunate in the Bay Area, but I know there's other ones around the country just happen to have this expertise with the SBIR program in particular. And we have a couple advisors who, that's pretty much all they do. So they will work with these businesses at no charge to the business and really help them package up their proposals to make them as strong as possible before they're submitted to the government. And our program here, I'm proud to brag, has 100% success rate in getting SBIR phase 1 funding. So that's these are resources that are already paid for with your taxpayer dollars, and I really encourage businesses to reach out. If for any business need but in particular some of these specialty programs where you really need a little extra support, because it's probably something unfamiliar to you.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I keep coming back to is I think that for many people, when they think of the SBA, or if they're familiar with the SBIR, they think of it as a resource for businesses who are maybe thinking at the smaller mid-sized level, who are going to be regional businesses, maybe grocery stores or restaurants or service industry, maybe some IT. But what's coming from this conversation is that there's a whole cadre of resources specifically focused to companies who are trying to get to the enterprise level over the next 5 to 7 years. And that's a really powerful insight for, I think, our founder groups, because right now they're 1 or 2 people, and they do fit into the category of being a small business because they're launching, they're literally bootstrapping everything and trying to wear so many hats. As a former founder myself, I know what that was like. To know that these tools are also being intentionally developed for people who want to go the enterprise level and want to go the rapid growth and venture route. I think that's just really exciting. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, when you're working with founders, what do you think what are like the top 3 things they should do to prepare for getting maybe the SBIR?
Well, I always think the first thing is to get, to check out your local support network from your resource advisors, or business advisors rather, from the SBA, to see if there's any specialty centers that cater to technology businesses and work with SBIR and some of the other programs out there. So find that business advisor. That would be step 1. Step 2 is really just make sure, even if you're at the startup phase and you've probably got this great idea, obviously, but do you know the financial side of it as well, and what it's going to
Yeah.
take to fund, and how you're going to need that funding, and really kind of think about the strategy. It's like, some people do have to bootstrap it and piece it together. But I think it's helpful to know kind of upfront, say, okay, today I need X amount to do this, this, and this. 8 months from now, I might need additional funding for this. 2 years from now, I'm going to need a large chunk of funding to do this or something. To understand that financial need to help you get from this idea and concept to the production or whatever it is that you're wanting to do. And I think having, you don't have to be an accountant, but at least having some idea of the financials and the financial situation you're in and what you're going to need. And then the other thing is, I think it's really helpful to search out. There are some like peer mentor groups and other things that you can talk to like-minded people or people who've had success and are maybe now looking to give back or share their knowledge.
Sure.
And a lot of these groups, some of them are local-based organizations that may or may not be affiliated with SBA even, but they do seem to exist in lots of pockets around the country, I think. And another, it's also in our business advisor cadre, but our SCORE program. These are often retired, but not always, men and women who now volunteer their time to give back and mentor businesses. And it's not uncommon to find people that maybe have done this before in their former life and are now have this font of knowledge they can share with you. And say a lot of them have industry expertise or this whole startup concept expertise. And maybe they were a lawyer who worked with a lot of these budding businesses. There's a lot of skill sets out there to tap into.
And I want to take it back to what you talked about with how the SBA loans are structured and really who's a good fit for those. So let's look at the scenario now of someone who's maybe close to raising a Series A. So they've got quite a bit of traction. They've got some revenue. They've tested their market. They've already done 1 or 2 funding rounds. How do you envision the SBA financial products being able to support a company that's in that phase?
So again, I think it's looking at what it is they need and not only just the dollar amount, but what they're going to use the proceeds of that loan or financial assistance for. And then also looking at how much equity is already out there, if you will, that they've
Okay, we all have beeps. So, sorry, you were talking about equity. Go for it.
Yeah, so it's a matter of then looking at what they have, because the one caveat I do like to point out to business owners or to people who are maybe sought equity first, or maybe they're still at the decision point, they haven't gotten any financing yet. They're like, do I go debt or do I go equity?
Yeah.
With SBA and pretty much I think it's pretty much a standard in the lending industry right now anyway, is this concept of personal guarantees, right? So for SBA programs, anyone who has a 20% or more ownership interest in that business will need to offer a personal guarantee on the loan, on the debt. So sometimes if someone has a lot of equity investors that total more than 20%, this can be a little bit more challenging for them to meet that requirement. And in some cases, businesses, if they're at the beginning phase of this, I was like, if debt is something for you, you might want to look at that first to get you launched, and then when you feel you're in a better position to go for equity, you might want to do that. Or if you're in the equity, if you've gone through equity, I'd look at how much, what proportionally you've given away, so to speak, and your fundraising, and see if that, if you're above the 20%, just have that in the back of your mind that the investors may be asked to sign a personal guarantee. And that might be something you build into your questions when you're looking at investors.
Got it. I'm wondering if we could dig in a little bit more to that, because that concept may not be particularly familiar for some of our viewers. When you're talking about the personal guarantee and how it relates to the amount of equity outside investors already have in your company, maybe you can walk me through a bit more, the initial considerations for a company before they're making the debt versus equity decision, and then how that affects, each round of financing they're considering.
Right. So for all businesses, no matter their industry, we always recommend that, you take a look at what you need it for, and when you need it, and what your ability to repay it, assuming it's debt.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to kind of match up all of those things with the right, product or loan or financial product, or type of financing. And it will change over time, right? For most people. So at the startup phase, I've had businesses that are out the gate. They're like, I need $5 million for this, this, and this. It's like, okay, you are in a different sphere than someone who's like, you know what? I just need to get a little bit of support, and I maybe only need $50,000 to get going, and then I'm going to go for some bigger dollars.
Sure.
So even with this, with the startups, I see the gamut amongst them and what they need. And so thinking about this from day one, so to speak, and deciding, okay, today, what do I really need? And not being afraid to take on debt, because I think debt is kind of a dirty word to most people.
Most people don't see it as an opportunity to support growth.
Right.
And so people get very anxious in the first few years of building their company. And, sometimes they're getting feedback from venture funders where it's a red flag if they have debt. And I think it goes back to what you were initially saying is, what does your runway look like? What amount of cash do you need to get from milestone to milestone? How long do you want to go between your capital raises, whether that's debt, whether that's a bridge product, whether that's equity, and thinking through that intentionally. One thing that I think is really useful is that the team that you have is able to facilitate those conversations in from a very neutral standpoint. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's definitely good to bring in a team of people. So whether they're, your co-founders, or whether it's these experts, our business advisors, or others that you might know of, if you have an attorney, for example, or some other advisors. These are your informal advisors that can help guide you and coach you along this path, and figure out some of the strategies that'll work for you, and what, when you're going to need funding. One thing, and it works in some startups and it doesn't for others, is even lines of credit sometimes, because you can draw upon it when you need it, and then maybe pay back a portion of it and draw more. So it's sometimes a more flexible tool that can fit the needs of some of these startups better than maybe a term loan. But for people who need a larger influx of cash, maybe up front, and they're okay, they're going to have at least a little bit of a revenue stream from something, and are able to start repaying it, at least the interest or something, then that might be the best product for them, because they can do it. They have enough funding to do what they need to do to get them to that success point, right? So I always tell people, there's debt can be used in a smart manner. Like there's such a thing as good, smart debt. And what you need to do is make sure that you're understanding what it is, and that you understand what this product is and what it's going to do for you, and how you can pay it back. Because the lenders, they care about getting their money back, right? But they can often be willing to structure things maybe a little bit differently. And that's why they might look for the SBA guarantee as well. Because if the bank internal policy only allows them to provide, a loan term of, let's say, 5 years on working capital, I'm making this up.
Interesting. Yeah, but
then
it's a good example.
Yeah, the SBA guarantee added on that can maybe allow them to extend that term to 8 years, thereby reducing the amount you would owe on your term loan, giving you more of a cash flow. So there's ways, there's these reasons these SBA products can be leveraged by banks, or reasons why they will look to them in order to help you as a borrower to maybe get the financing on more favorable terms, in the sense of it's maybe not the lowest interest rate, but it's on a term that's more conducive to match what you think you can do when you look at your financial projections and what your plans are. So I do tell people that there's reasons that these lenders will look to an SBA guarantee on these different deals, because it does lower the risk for the lender, for starters,
Yeah.
and makes it a more entices them to do a deal that was maybe a little that higher risk than they would do on their own, but now they've got a guarantee. And this year, actually, there's a temporary increase, so we're offering up to 90% guarantee on these loans. So the banks will only have to assume 10% risk, which is great.
So that changes the structure of their risk profile tremendously. I wonder, I'd like to ask you a few questions about choosing a banking partner. But before we do that, one of the things that I thought was interesting when you were mentioning the the AI company that you've been advising, who's gone through 2 phase 1 rounds with the SBIR. So in the long trajectory of the long-term trajectory, I could envision someone going from a phase 1, maybe a follow-up phase 1 to a phase 2, having some really strong revenue and finance projections, and then transitioning to an SBA-backed product through the right lender. Do you think that that is a trajectory that might make sense for some companies? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think it again goes to helping them with their needs, and some businesses, might need steady level funding throughout, and others might need an influx of cash at certain points because of development needs and whatever else is happening. I think, for a lot of these businesses, even if they have some SBIR funding, maybe they're a younger company, and as a company, they don't have as much of a track record. But I also tell people, you got to look at the ownership too. Look at the founders. And so if you have experience in that industry, or you personally have a track record of success in that also is something factored into what a lender or an external funder will look at as well. So even though your business is young, if you have a track record or you have experience, that definitely will help, and it'll support you getting pretty much any type of external financing.
It's true. It's true.
And so, in this case, looking at this business's experience before he ever even started looking at government contracting, while he's he's not been in business for he's only been in business for a couple of years, but he's been leveraging this program, and I definitely think he probably will need to go for whether it's a term loan, probably in the near future, to help support some of the growth or the development growth, especially I think when you get into the later phases and you are looking at the commercialization, especially if there's production costs or things associated with that. So
sure. And I mean, I think that really helps contextualize how these two programs support each other, and the intention behind them, which is to increase economic development and to acknowledge the fact that when a company is starting off, oftentimes it's bootstrapped. And regardless of if they're going to go the enterprise route or they're going to stick to their regional areas, the fundamentals of how they choose their team and they think through what their financial needs are important. And I think that actually, transitions us into one of the other topics I wanted to get to with you, which is how to consider a banking partner, because you and I have talked about, from, early stage, thinking through what do you need from a banking partner. And if you're trying to leverage some of these products that the SBA offers, what are some considerations when you're starting to basically interview banks?
Right. So, obviously we know there's lots of banks and financial institutions to choose from out there. If you think that you will want or that you will be a good candidate for, an SBA guaranteed program or something, obviously your first litmus test will be, does this financial institution participate in SBA's programs? And all of that information is easy to find on our website or by working with your local district office to figure that out. And then once you do, it's kind of looking at, again, what your needs are. So if you don't have big financing needs out the gate, you can probably start with a smaller institution, maybe a community bank, or a smaller regional bank. But then as you grow, your needs might change and you might need a larger bank that has different types of products that you can tap into to help support your growth. And it's not unusual, I think, for people to start with a smaller bank, and maybe they will always continue the relationship with that bank, but then they'll add in a second or a third institution to help support some of their growth needs, especially if it's a rapid growth industry or business. Their needs are going to accelerate probably pretty quickly.
Sure.
But on top of that, not just finding the type of bank that offers the kinds of products that you might want to utilize, it's also, I think, trying to find that business development manager, or whatever terminology that bank uses. But this is going to be kind of another informal advisor to your business. This is someone you're going to be sharing a lot of very sensitive information with about your financial situation with not only your business, but you personally, because you are your business at this phase. So they are going to look at you too. So
yeah, absolutely.
You want to make sure this is someone, and I'm talking about like the person too, not just the institution, the person who is going to kind of be a champion for you inside that bank, to support the financial needs that you have, and someone you can talk to, and that is reasonably accessible and responsive. And I always tell people, you have to be comfortable. So just because a bank advertises they're the number one lender for X, that's great, but you need to be comfortable working with that is not only that institution, but there's usually an individual or two that you will be either assigned to or working with, and you need to make sure you have some sort of comfort level with them as well.
And
So
just out of also just to follow up on that, when we're talking about whether or not a bank participates in the program, can you maybe talk about the types of banks that have opted to participate in these SBA programs?
Sure. So when we're looking at our, more traditional government guaranteed loan program, I tell people, probably wherever you're located, probably whatever traditional bank commercial lender you can think of, they probably participate. But then there's also other types of institutions that you may not think of that can participate. In the last couple of years, we've even seen greater growth in credit unions, for example, participating in, as long as they have a commercial side, participating in the program. Also some nonprofit lenders, CDFIs, local organizations that are able to participate. They might not be able to do the $5 million loans, but they can participate either in maybe our Community Advantage program, which is loans up to $250,000. So there are the traditional banks that people will think of, but then there's some other more non-traditional financial institutions that people might want to look into as well. So and more, are interested all the time. And, we saw a growth of the types of lenders that are participating with us because of the PPP program. And, some of them might decide to stick around.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess when you're talking about that personal relationship building with a banker that really is going to know some of the most confidential aspects of your business, what are some questions that you consider good starting points when you're starting to have that conversation with your business development banking partner?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things I would look to ask them. I would ask them, some more like procedural or technical questions, so to speak, about, what their bank process is for how they evaluate loans? I mean, does that, if you're dealing with a loan officer, does that loan officer have the authority to make unilateral decisions up to a certain dollar limit? Then it goes to a committee after that. Usually different banks have different processes. And that'll not only inform, how much time the process might take, but also how many hands are going to touch it. And so if it's going to go through a lot of different hands, you want to have someone in the bank who's going to maybe champion it all the way through that process. But I would
Yeah.
also want to know if they have experience, in your industry or working with your type of business or this, startup or very young businesses. Do they have a track record of working with them? Does the bank have a track record of supporting those types of businesses? And then I would also want to see, like, might want to learn a little bit about that lender, that person too, and what kind of like where their comfort zone is, and what kind of lending they typically get involved with, because
Yeah.
that'll also inform like how much you might need to educate your lender.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have a lot of experience but seem very interested and very supportive and think that this could be a really bankable project or idea. You'll want to know how much you're going to need to educate them on what you're doing. So again, if they're going to shepherd it through the process in their bank, they need to be able to understand what you're doing, right? So
Yeah, and I'm just curious because one of the things I think is really great about the how we're framing this conversation is seeing the institution, that your banking institution, as your partner, and making sure that you're asking them questions the way you would ask your lawyer during your interview process to see if they understand incorporation processes and the unique legal situations that startups have. Alternatively, reviewing investment theses of potential angels or venture funds, and making sure that the types of support that they offer and the funding rounds that they offer and whether or not they do follow-up rounds match your needs as well. Thinking about banking in those terms, I think refocuses the conversation and maybe takes some of the anxiety off for our founders who, again, debt can seem like a dirty word. Instead of thinking about it as a risk, thinking about how this resource of having a really strong banking partner can get you to where you want to go.
yeah, the other piece of this that I tell businesses why you want to have a business manager or somebody, relationship manager, who's someone you can talk to and is reasonably accessible, because if things don't go according to plan and maybe your projections are not being fully realized, you want to start having conversations with them sooner rather than later. You don't want to get into that really difficult spot where it's going to be really hard to dig out. But having those conversations earlier, and I realize it's probably not going to be the most fun conversation you have, but hey, like, I'm not quite hitting some of these projections, but I think it's going to take me an extra 6 months. And they might be willing to work with you to restructure that debt even a little bit so that we can move, payment cycles around or something. They often have some flexibility on how the debt is structured and changing it even midstream to help you out and maybe improve your cash flow, even if it's temporarily, so that you can get back on track perhaps, or do what you need to do. So I think a lot of businesses get afraid to talk to their lender, like, okay, I can't let them know I'm having a problem. But then they get to the point of no return. And, at that point, we're looking at default situations and things like that. Whereas if they had started a year earlier, there might have been things that could be done to help.
Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful for this conversation. I can't believe that our time is already about to come to an end. We have about 5 minutes left. I wanted to see if there were particular programs you wanted to highlight, particularly if the SBA or the SBIR is prioritizing funds for founders who are individuals of color or women, or are, I think you mentioned veterans. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, and then we'll wrap up our conversation.
Sure. So I'll start with SBIR program. So I've not seen anything that has any sort of prioritization for any socioeconomic group or type of business. It's really the federal agency that has the funding has a need, and they put the need out there and let, you know, the universe of small businesses that are interested respond or submit proposals. So I haven't seen anything categorized that way. Not to say that that couldn't be something that develops in the future, but as the program exists today, I have not seen that. But within the financial assistance products, especially some of our guaranteed loan programs, there's not necessarily a specific fund, so to speak, for different types of small businesses. It's for all small businesses, but there are some lenders and some other, like especially some CDFIs and other groups that target and really try to support different types of business owners. So whether it be a woman or a veteran, I mean, I've got one that's they lend to everybody, but they do have a specialty niche where they really are focused on veterans and spouses of veterans to support. So in those kinds of, you know, specialty or targeted type lenders do exist all over the country. And so that's another reason you might want to reach out to your local district office, somebody to say, hey, what programs exist in my community that I might want to tap into. So some of them are, like I said, they're open, you know, open to all, but they do specialize or try to target different types of business owners.
Well, thank you so much, Julie. I'm imagining that people are going to have a lot of questions. So what we'll do is we'll put together some resources, and I can get your feedback on those, and then we'll make those available to our group. And I think moving forward, I'd love to have you come back and talk a bit more. It sounds like you have some really great stories of companies that have had successes with the SBA and with the SBIR, and I can't wait to learn more from you.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Julie. Have a good evening.